Hey Grand Adventurers, welcome back. I'm your host Mark Guido, and we're spending this week in the Kootenays of southeastern British Columbia, camping right on the shores of Summit Lake, right outside the town of Nakusp. We have a whole lot to visit and explore around here, so stay tuned. This episode of Grand Adventure is sponsored by etrailer.com, where you'll find thousands of products for RVing, towing, camping, outdoor recreation, vehicles, boating, and more. Click the link in the video description or scan the code on your screen to shop etrailer.com with Grand Adventure. They say that the journey is half the fun. And that couldn't be more true than today, as we're moving from last week's stop in Revelstoke, British Columbia, to our home for this week's Grand Adventure, 8 miles outside the village of Nakusp. That trip will take us down both virtually uninhabited shores of Upper Arrow Lake via BC Route 23, connecting from the western shore to the eastern shore via the Upper Arrow Lake Ferry. Divided into Upper Arrow Lake and Lower Arrow Lake, the Arrow Lakes are widenings of the Columbia River, situated between the Selkirk Mountains to the east and the Monashee Mountains to the west, rising steeply to elevations of around 8,500 feet. Originally 2 lakes 14 miles apart, the Arrow Lakes became one 140-mile-long lake following a 39-foot rise in water levels, with the 1960s construction of the Keenly Side Dam. One vessel, the 80-vehicle, 250-passenger capacity MV Columbia, introduced in 2014, makes the 20-minute crossing of Upper Arrow Lake. Southbound departures leave the dock once an hour, on the hour. Like all inland ferries in British Columbia, this one operates without a toll charge. The first town one encounters, 61 miles south of Revelstoke, is Nakusp, home to approximately 1,600 residents. A post office, general store, and sawmill opened here in 1892, but building lots in the community weren't placed up for sale until the following year. A school came in 1895 and church in 1898. Electric power arrived in 1920. Mining used to be the most important industry in the area around Nakusp, extracting primarily galena and gold. By the early 1930s, a Canadian Pacific shipyard, forestry headquarters, and 2 sawmills operated, and surrounding lands were farmed. Forestry has formed the major economic base for the village since the 1950s. Nakusp was finally incorporated as a village in 1964. The reservoir for the Keelyside Dam submerged the former waterfront area in 1968, necessitating some reconstruction. A scenic waterfront walk through town lines the lakeshore. The community of Nakusp maintains a tidy little museum that's filled to the brim with artifacts, exhibits, photographs, and more that tell the story of this part of the Western Kootenay in exquisite detail. We'll share the wonderful, family-oriented campground where we're staying on Summit Lake near Nakusp, right after we take a brief moment to share a message from our valued video sponsor, eTrailer. Whether you need products for your RV, boat, trailer, vehicle, hunting and fishing, off-roading, and more, our video sponsor eTrailer has you covered. Best of all, you'll find over 100 US-based enthusiast customer service reps ready to help via phone, chat, or email, both before and after the sale. These folks have used themselves the products that you're shopping for, and you won't find a more knowledgeable team anywhere to help you with your outdoor project. Click the link in the video description or scan the code on your screen to shop etrailer.com with Grand Adventure. For our week in this part of the Kootenays, we're staying at Camp Valhalla, a wonderful family-oriented campground on Summit Lake, beneath the steep slopes of the Valhalla range of the Selkirk Mountains. There are two sandy beaches, one for humans and one for off-leash dogs to play and swim. We're paying $59 Canadian per night for a deluxe pull-through full hookup site, or $42.50 US dollars at today's exchange rate. Our compliments to the owners of Camp Valhalla for not nickel and diming its guests to death. In fact, they've stepped out in the other direction, with free use of their varied watercraft on Summit Lake, what they've nicknamed the Summit Lake Yacht Club. They'll hand scoop any size ice cream cone you'd like for $5 Canadian. And sure, it's only one washer and dryer, but when was the last time a campground offered you free use of their laundry facilities? The spirit, the vibe here has been overwhelmingly positive, a feeling that's been reflected by our friendly camping neighbors too. The Summit Lake Rail Trail passes right behind Camp Valhalla, providing the perfect scenic reason to take our e-bike down out of its rack. The Nakusp and Slocan Railway operated along this line beginning in 1894. It's constructed prompted by the 1891 discovery of silver in the Slocan Range, which created a mining boom. South of Summit Lake, BC Route 6 descends into the Slocan Valley, filled by the 25-mile-long Slocan Lake and the Slocan River that drains it. Valhalla Provincial Park lies on the lake's western shore, most of which is only accessible by boat from across the lake. Today, at the end of August, we're experiencing only the second day with hints of wildfire smoke that we've seen all season. This was home to the mining rush dubbed the Silvery Slocan that came in 1895. Although many of the mines had already closed by 1906, small-scale mining remained viable for many years thereafter, thanks to the richness of the ores surrounding the small towns of Rosebery, New Denver, and Silverton near the lake center. Around the village of Slocan at the lake's outlet, at the time incorporated as a city, more than half of the 125 mining claims were mineral producers, and 13 mines produced more than 1 million grams of silver. Springer Creek Forest Products was the village's biggest employer until its closure in 2013. So, is it Slocan or Slocan? Knowing how people feel about their local pronunciations, from their comments on our videos, we're bound to get skewered either way. Encyclopedia entries say that it's Slocan, but the newspaper in nearby Castlegar says that in the case of the town, the valley, the lake, and the river, it's Slocan. Either way, we can't ever win. One thing I do know, if this place was in our home state of Utah, the linguistically lazy would have shortened it to Slocan. There's some fascinating history here besides mining. For America wasn't the only country that interned people of Japanese descent during World War II. Slocan, Rosebery, New Denver, Kaslo, Sandon, and other towns of the West Kootenay were home to internment camps, housing thousands of Japanese Canadians forcibly removed from the BC coast. The site of the internment camp, called the Orchard in New Denver, is now a National Historic Site operated by the village. Nikkei is a Japanese word describing people of Japanese descent who live abroad or are born abroad. After World War II, the Canadian government ordered all internment camps to be bulldozed, erasing all evidence that the internment had even occurred. The Orchard was the only exception, and several of the buildings included in the Nikkei Internment Memorial Center are original. All male Japanese Canadians between the ages of 18 and 45 were excluded from a 100-mile zone along Canada's Pacific coast beginning in early 1942. They were also ordered to turn all of their property over to the government. This is how these dwellings would have appeared when the first internees arrived in 1942. After a year in New Denver, the residents would have added their own touches to their living space. By early 1943, the government began selling internees' property without their consent. When the Japanese were released from these camps in 1945, they were given two options: move east to the Rocky Mountains or face forced exile to Japan. They were not allowed to again live west of the Rockies until the restrictions were lifted 4 years later. In 1957, the BC government deeded the remaining dwellings to Japanese Canadians. This one continued to be occupied until 1985, even though it never had hot running water. When we come right back, following a quick ad break, we'll go kayaking on Summit Lake right at Camp Valhalla and visit some marvelous local natural hot springs. So stay tuned. Summit Lake at Camp Valhalla is perfect for a relaxing paddle on the water, whether using a vessel from the Summit Lake Yacht Club or if you bring your own mode of water transportation, as we do. The peninsula, directly across from Camp Valhalla, is a BC provincial park with a forested campground of its own. There are 3 small islands in Summit Lake, lending some welcome character to an afternoon paddle here. Following that paddle, my bum shoulder could use some rejuvenation. For that, you may have noticed that we have a thing for hot springs. It probably has something to do with the one amenity that I miss most from living in a sticks and bricks home is a bathtub, or the outdoor hot tub that we once had. This season, all of the springs we visited in Western Canada have been of the swimming pool variety. Our preference, though, is for natural rock pools in the middle of the wilderness. And that's what we're heading for today at Halfway Hot Springs. These springs come with a grand adventure of their own, including a roadside stop to take in the scenic splendor of 95-foot Ione Falls, tumbling down from high on Mount Sanderson. The springs are located on BC Crown land 7 miles up a dusty washboard forest road that begins along the eastern shoreline of Upper Arrow Lake, 16 miles north of Nakusp and just north of Ione Falls. Following the bumpy drive, the springs require a short but steep 10-minute hike down into the canyon of the Halfway River to access. So bring proper footwear. Watch out, too, for the prolific poison ivy that grows in places here. There are a number of hot springs of varying temperatures in the immediate area, but this trail from a small parking area leads to what are the main springs. With rising popularity, the springs were being abused and falling into disrepair. But thankfully, they fell under the purview of BC Parks in the summer of 2016. A host now lives on site and maintains both the hot springs and a small network of rustic nearby campsites during the summer months. Halfway Hot Springs bubble right out of the hillside along this scenic river, feeding an amateur tube network into a series of stone-lined mud-bottom pools. A nifty changing room has been constructed right next to the pools for convenience. Now that you're relaxed from a soak in the pools, you get to climb back up the hill, which is just as steep going up as it was coming down. Earlier, we told you about the silvery Slocan mining rush. We're driving up this dead-end dirt road in the Selkirks today to visit the most famous of these mining ghost towns, Sandon. Among the prospectors who descended upon the Slocan Valley in the fall of 1891, John Sandon staked several claims, including one dubbed the Slocan Star. He sold his interest in the Slocan Star that December to his partner Bruce White for $500. It was a property that would become extremely valuable. The Sandon town site was laid out in July 1893. Referred to as the Monte Carlo of North America, throughout the mining boom of the 1890s, the town included many hotels, 3 breweries, and a red light district. Facilities also included a large curling arena, hockey rink, 2 ski hills, and venues for lacrosse, soccer, baseball, lawn bowling, cricket, and tennis. Indoor facilities included a bowling alley, billiard halls, and a gymnasium. It was the first fully electrified town in BC, thanks to its silversmith powerhouse, the second hydroelectricity plant in Western Canada that's still operating today as the oldest continuous producer in Western Canada. The town's hospital acquired the province's first X-ray machine in 1902. 2 different railways raced to reach the town first. The Kaslo and Slocan Railway, owned by the Great Northern Railway, connected Sandon with Kaslo. The Nakusp and Slocan Railway, owned by the Canadian Pacific, connected with Nakusp on the Upper Arrow Lake in the Slocan Lake Ferry at Rosebery. That's the railroad bed on which we rode our e-bike in this episode. Collectively, the Sandon silver mines were the richest in the province from 1892 to 1900, although World War I was the most productive mining period. Klondike Silver Corp acquired the dormant Sylvana mine, but ceased operation 2 years ago. Sandon hosted one of the West Kootenay internment camps housing Japanese Canadians during World War II. The 953 internees, who coexisted peacefully with the then 50 residents, both occupied and rehabilitated the dilapidated, largely empty buildings. As many as 25 internees lived at one time in this home. town struggled repeatedly through fires and avalanches. With the creek blocked, following torrential rain in June 1955, the overflow destroyed most remaining structures. Vandals and treasure hunters scavenged the rest. You can even RV camp here among the relics. The few remaining citizens and newcomers to Sandon have fought to prevent total loss of the remnants, one of whom is Murray Stewart, who arrived here in 1981. Stewart rehabilitated what was once known as Dr. Grom's house, which he acquired for $2,500 before it burned in 2008, along with what was once the Tin Cup Cafe. Today, Stewart lives on the property in an old fifth-wheel trailer. He saw us filming and came outside to answer any questions, beginning what turned out to be a spirited and welcome 25-minute conversation about the town, its history, and its people. We hope that you've enjoyed exploring the area surrounding Summit Lake in Nakusp, British Columbia with us. We're going to get packed up, but we're not going very far this week, heading south to the area around Castlegar and Nelson. So if you're not yet a grand adventurer yourself, there is no better time than right now for you to go smash that little subscribe button right down there in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. And ring that notification bell to be sure that you never miss a grand adventure, which we premiere right here every Wednesday evening. We'd be honored if you shared the channel with your friends, family, and on social media. Understand, it's extremely important to us that if you enjoyed this episode from Nakusp, please be sure to give us a huge thumbs up down below. And while you're down below, that's where you'll find the comment section where we'd love to hear from you each and every week. So until next Wednesday from Castlegar, please remember, life is nothing but a grand adventure. We'll see you then.